The British High Commissioner to Australia is set to leave our shores, a little earlier than expected, next week in fact. Baroness Valerie Amos has been appointed as the UN's new Chief of Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Control. The role will make Lady Amos the highest-ranked British official at the United Nations. This week she spoke with Virginia Hausiger about her extraordinary career and, given the change in government in the UK, the state of Britain's relationship with Australia.
I actually don't think it's changed that relationship at all. What has happened is that the coalition government has said that there are certain things that they would like us to work on more. There's a particular focus on trade and investment issues, for example. They want to really reinvigorate the Commonwealth, and of course we would have to work closely with Australia in relation to that, looking forward to CHOGM next year, but working with other Commonwealth partners as well. The kind of foreign policy issues we work on together remain important. So from my perspective, it's very much been about saying to Australians the relationship remains important, the relationship remains strong. We've got some big key things coming up next year.
Your new role as Under-Secretary-General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator will make you the highest British official at the UN and put you in the top 5 UN jobs. Has this been a position that you have long coveted?
No, not really. I have long thought about working in the UN system. I think it's people become frustrated by the UN system sometimes, but I think the reality is that if we didn't have it, we would have to create it, because obviously it's better to have an institution which helps us to promote peace rather than to have conflict, and I think that the UN is incredibly important.
I want to ask you about your career trajectory, which has been quite extraordinary. I mean, you've smashed so many ceilings.
Well, it doesn't feel like that when you're doing it, I have to say.
But you have. I'm the first black girl to be deputy head at the school you went to. The first black family to move into the suburb in Kent you lived in. The first black woman in cabinet. The first black woman to be the leader of the House of Lords. I mean, constantly pushing boundaries. What motivates you to do that?
Well, I think the way that I was brought up, my parents were very, very important in who I think we became as adults in my family. We were migrants, immigrants from a country called Guyana in South America, a former British colony. But my parents always said education is important. It really opens up the doors to many things. And if you work hard, focus on your education and doing well, basically the world is your oyster. People who know me will say that if you put an enormous challenge in front of me, I'll leap at it.
How important were those family ties when you first, as a young girl, encountered racism?
Oh, they were incredibly important, because it was, you kind of go home and you explain an incident, and my parents were very important in terms of explaining to us that it wasn't really about us, and it was more about other people, and worked with us to ensure that we didn't take these things personally. So it was incredibly important. I remember when we first arrived in the United Kingdom, and my sister and I went to our first primary school. We came back and we'd been put into, the bottom class. And we explained that to my mum, and she was at the school the following day and said, what's the basis on which you made this decision about my children? So always challenging, but challenging in a way that enabled a positive result, really.
High Commissioner, your personal life has been very different from most women's experiences. You've never married, you've never had children. Now, they're contentious issues here in Australia, as Julia Gillard well knows. Those issues have been discussed at length about whether or not it's possible for a woman in a leadership position or powerful position to be unmarried and childless. Have you endured that kind of scrutiny yourself?
Of course. I mean, all politicians come under scrutiny, not just the women.
But particularly about the fact that you're not married and childless.
But there are particular issues around women who don't have children, who aren't married. And of course I've faced those. And you face them from family too, because, at the beginning beginning of your career, people want to think that, you're going to have the kind of family life that they have had, and you're going to have children. And I mean, I love children, but I have nieces and nephews, and I have, lots of godchildren, and that's great. I just never particularly felt that I needed to have my own children.
Do you have any regrets that you didn't go down that path? Is it something you see as a cost or consequence of your career?
No, I don't. I feel it's and it's not even a particular choice that I made right at the beginning. As I said, I've always loved children. I enjoyed being with children, but I have never ever thought that they had to be mine, and I haven't regretted that. And again, I've never got to the point where I thought this is a person I particularly want to be married to. So I'm not married.
You made a very striking speech on International Women's Day here in Sydney when you said...
I thought I was rather brave, actually.
It was a very brave speech and a very timely speech. But one of the things that struck me is when you said, poverty has a woman's face. Why do you think it is that there has been such slow progress in achieving gender equality in developing nations?
Well, it depends what you look at. If you look at a country like Rwanda, of course, they've got the highest proportion of women in parliament of any country in the world. They've got a high numbers of women in cabinet. But if you look at some of the poorest countries in the world, and you look at levels of maternal mortality, what happens to children, it's women who are bearing the brunt of that. And so few of those women have access to any kind of resources or any kind of money to help to improve the economic circumstances of their families. And if you're a developing country government and you cannot even provide water to your citizens, you can't provide electricity, you cannot provide the basics of life, really putting women at the heart of your development agenda is not necessarily the first thing that you're going to do.
Your new role at the UN, I know it's too early to discuss your plans, but what excites you about that role?
Well, it's a job in which you can just make a huge difference. If you think about what is happening right now, what we're seeing on our TV screens every single day in terms of the flooding in Pakistan, for example, this is something that the UN agency that I will be running from September has an absolutely key and central role in terms of trying to bring all of the different actors together, working with the government of Pakistan, working with the NGOs, working with donors and others to have a coordinated and effective response in that crisis. It's not an easy thing to do. There is the infrastructure has been washed away. It's a long way away from cities. You're having to make a particular kind of intervention, and the weather is against you. But if you get it right, you save millions or thousands of lives, and it's very immediate. So, of course, when I was asked if I was prepared to be nominated for it, I jumped at it. I mean, it's a huge challenge, but I can't think about anything that would be quite as rewarding as getting this right.
Baroness Valerie Amos, thank you very much for your time indeed.
Thank you.